So it's Pride Month and Woolworths has received homophobic backlash on social media. Users have threatened to boycott the retailer should the campaign continue. However, Woolworths say they're standing by their decision to celebrate the queer community through International Pride Month and that campaign. So let's get you some experts to weigh in on what we should make of this moment. Joining us now is LGBTQI plus activist Denise Rapisi, who joins us via our telephone line this morning. Denise, it's great to have you on the program, and thanks for availing yourself to help us have what I think is still quite a complex discussion, right? On the one hand, it's very obvious in some instances where there is bigotry and homophobia. But on the other, there are also some activists in the space who look at what Woolworths is doing through multiple lenses. So, yes, there is a campaign to centralize the experiences of queer people, but on the other hand, there's real concerns around tokenizing that experience for capitalist gain.
I agree. I think it's a great thing at the time that we're currently finding ourselves, especially as a continent in Africa. We are looking at countries like Uganda who have perpetrated the most harsh sentences against the LGBTQIA plus community. And so we are happy for campaigns like this. But at the same time, we need to remember that the purpose for Pride Month also derives from something that is not necessarily a South African historical event. It originates from Stonewall, which was a raid that happened in the States a few years ago. So yes, partly there is capitalistic gain, but for me, I feel that there is always value in administering and always advocating for LGBTQ plus rights.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose if you're going to do something for this marginalized community, it needs to be something that counts, right? And I suppose that opens up the door for us to have discussions around what kind of allyship actually matters, you know? A campaign like this, for instance, in what ways does it help queer people who, I don't know, in some instances may not even be able to access a Woolies?
I think for me, visibility is very, very important during this time. It's important that we see faces. It's important that we see brands. So if you look at the Ally campaign, specifically what Woolworths has done, in stores, you can see couples of families from same-sex relationships. And that, for me, plays a very particular role in visibility. So you have people from everywhere who would walk into Woolworths stores, and people from marginalized communities, people from upper class communities, and that for me is the most important thing in creating visibility for it. Yes, I do also acknowledge and also see that parts of allyship, it actually gets conversation started. The fact that you're having people that are talking about it, people that are actually threatening to boycott Woolworths, speaks to where we are as a country. I mean, we have one of the first constitutions that was ever written in the world that advocated for same-sex marriages and legalized it. Yet we're still here in 2023 arguing about whether it's right or wrong to have a same-sex campaign in a store, which is quite weird. I think like we've come so far as a country, and you wouldn't even think that it was still an issue in 2023. So we do still need allies. We do still need people to support us and to also stand by us. They don't always have to administer for the same thing, but it also speaks to if you go into any other store, we always face with heteronormative visuals every time, families, people, straight couples, every single time. What is there to take away from a single month? So I think people are being a bit unfair towards with regards to their allyship campaign.
Yeah. You know, there are some people who are in support of the campaign, by the way, who say for them the irony is that they weren't even aware of the initiative that's been run by Woolworths, but it's all the talk around it that's brought it to their attention. And that made me think about the role still that can be played by those in the community at that time, you know. Depending on perhaps the nature of your own experience as an activist, whenever there's backlash, some people choose not to say anything. They choose not to be visible. But perhaps there's an invitation there in some ways to use this as some kind of teaching moment. Is that asking for too much?
No, not at all. But I also feel like if a campaign like this is to go out, right? Like I said, it's important to acknowledge that our actual Pride Month happens around October. That's when we had our first Pride. The importance of a historical moment like Stonewall is celebrated in the States. And it has become a global event. But what is Woolworths really doing in terms of giving back to the community? What are they doing to actually advocate? Where are the proceeds that are being held? Is there funding that's being held for communities and for younger people, especially in townships? Are they doing something for Soweto Pride? Are they doing something for Guatemala, marginalized communities, or Guguletu? There's so much that Woolworths could be doing in terms of this campaign. And I'd like to see brands actually come to the party holistically, not just from a brand partnership where we want to see what are their teachings around it. Cool, it's fun to have a rainbow and to have same-sex couples in the store, but there is a teaching moment in actually saying where this history comes from. You don't just put up a same-sex couple. Why? What's the historical impact on it? What's the historical value? So for me, it is a teaching moment, but Woolworths needs to do more, and that would really help. It would really help if they actually spoke about what is the purpose of Pride Month within South Africa, and how does Stonewall play a role in South Africa. It really doesn't. It's very minimalistic, but it is always great to see them advocating for same-sex rights.
Right. There is a historical context in which we find ourselves, so to speak. But the real dog work, of course, comes when we need to speak about changing perceptions, which is what I find is always the difficulty, right? Whether the Constitution changes, Woolworths and all these other leading retailers have campaigns around it, if somehow that doesn't translate in the man, woman, or person in the street changing their views around queer people, then in many ways, all we do is develop echo chambers that don't really move us forward.
Exactly. They really don't move us forward. I think it's how we actually speak to the community, how we actually bring in the community. It's collaborations with people like 1 in 9 campaign, who's doing amazing work, Forum for the Empowerment of Women, the Triangle Project, a few homeless shelters. How do we actually go into communities and bring them in to start having conversations? Because the problem is that, right, we have people at the bottom and people all around are still struggling to have access to those conversations. And kids to this day are still scared of coming out. But thank God for social media, where they have access to visibility and to seeing people and icons that are coming out, and people continuously who are similar to us. And I think that, for me, always plays a role in terms of seeing. I want to specifically maybe also speak to people like Eusebius Makaiser, rest in peace, who was so instrumental in speaking out and living the change. And it was never about brand awareness. It was never about that. It was just about being himself. And that, for me, speaks to a child who is scared or might be in the closet, that can actually come out and help communities to see that this is a normal person that everyone can love, and everyone can actually relate to. And their sexuality is just one thing aside, and their gender is just a thing that happens to be a part of them.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Eusebius. One thing he was really good at was helping all of us think about ways through which, even in this moment, we can do better. Some activists have come out to speak about how, ironically, Pride Month is about inclusivity and ensuring that those in the margins are brought to the center. But there are conversations to be had within the community itself about ways through which, ironically, it generates the forms of discrimination it hopes to fight against.
Exactly. As a community as well, we are also faced with a lot of diversity, but also we are faced with a lot of classism. And we are faced with a lot of things that we also need to deal with. Again, the Woolworths campaign speaks to one, and it echoes to one part of our society, those who have access to Woolworths. For me, I would like to see brands, if we had more campaigns like this across Checkers stores, across stores like Pep stores that are accessible to everyone, where a YouSave store, not to pull some of these brands out, but it's important that everyone has access to those stores. So if I'm not walking into a Woolworths, or if I don't shop at a Woolworths store, then I have no access to that visibility. So I think, again, within the community, again, there is classism. Within this campaign, there is classism. And we need to work our way out of it and try and find. And I know that there are many initiatives that speak to trying to be more inclusive. And how do we do that, right? How do we start? What are the conversations that we need to have? And where do we take it forward? And I think, again, we will be revisiting this conversation when we actually have our own Pride Month in South Africa.
Absolutely. Denise Rapisi, thanks very much indeed for giving us your take. Really appreciate your time on the AM Report. Denise is a queer activist.